The Golden Apple Archipelago, an area introduced in Genshin Impact's 1.6 Midsummer Island Adventure update, is a fresh new experience, yet it takes players back to one of the game's main draws, exploration. Running around, finding hidden secrets and learning about the history behind the islands, all while we are treated to cutscenes featuring our favorite characters, is undoubtedly some of the best this game has to offer. So that's why when it was revealed that the archipelago would only be available temporarily, it was definitely quite a surprise. The other area released post-launch was version 1.2's Dragonspine, which has been kept as a permanent part of the game since. So that begs the question, why make it available for only a limited time? This video doesn't reflect my personal opinion, since I am relatively indifferent on the matter. I just want to try and understand the potential rationale behind the decision. The first and probably most obvious reason is that exclusivity, whether it be created through time gates or some other means, attracts attention. In the same way that Jean's outfit being discounted for only the duration of 1.6 may motivate people who are on the fence to buy. By making the Golden Apple Archipelago disappear after 1.6, players who are a bit interested will be more likely to actually hop on the game again so that they don't miss out. In a way, it's a natural progression from the other events which happen in the game, which are also only available for a certain period of time. It's just that now, the scale is much bigger, making it even more likely to not just appeal to consistent players, but to intermittent players and even new players. A similar situation happened in the event released in 1.1, Unreconciled Stars. This event really stood out to me because it featured multiple cutscenes, including a character that hadn't previously had development in Fischl, and it introduced a brand new character, Scaramouche. It was pretty fun, but presumably the event story isn't necessary to the overarching plot of Genshin Impact since it was removed. I'm sure there are players who missed out on the event that would have wanted to play it, but if you are really that invested, then you can go on YouTube and just watch the cutscenes. Similarly, the cutscenes from the archipelago will still be enjoyable to watch after the fact, and as for the gameplay, like other events, it was never meant to be a permanent addition to begin with. So due to the nature of the 1.6 update being a beach episode of sorts, and in part due to the limited availability of the content, the fact of the matter is that 1.6 has done its job by captivating returning players and catching the attention of newcomers. Some people may be confused why MiHoYo would go through all of this effort to make a new area if they are just going to remove it. Why allocate resources to this rather than a new permanent area? The other reasons in this video may justify it, but also a false assumption that is easy to make is that the archipelago is a one and done kind of deal. Just because it's going away doesn't mean that the work which went into it was for nothing, and I don't just mean because it provides content for the entirety of 1.6. I guess the best way to put it in perspective is to compare it to the regional celebrations which we have had so far, being the Lantern Rite and Windbloom Festival. These events also included cutscenes, minigames, and while there was no new area, they did neat redesigns of the cities to fit the celebration themes. While these additions are admittedly on a much smaller scale than the archipelagos, I don't think anybody would argue that making those were a waste of time because a good amount of that stuff will probably be reused the next time we have that celebration. But even still, I highly doubt that the return of the celebrations would be exactly the same. We'll probably have different cutscenes featuring different characters, and the minigames will probably have interesting changes to them. This would allow for players who hadn't previously played the event to get the same general experience while still providing regular players with fresh new content. In the same vein, I wouldn't be surprised if the Golden Apple Archipelago comes back every summer, but with a new story and new things to do so that it isn't stale. But even outside of a potential rerun, we already know that parts of the update are going to be repurposed. It has been officially confirmed that the Magu Kenki boss fight and the Sea Ganoderma material can be farmed after 1.6 in order to upgrade Kazuha. So chances are that other work that went into developing the archipelago will be made useful in other places. Personally, I'm hoping that we can use the boat in certain parts of Inazuma, but we'll have to wait and see. To video game publishers and producers, accessibility is really important, not just in terms of demographic appeal, but also in physically letting as many people actually play the game as possible. That's why money is invested in things like publishing to different platforms and having support for a whole bunch of different languages. The fact of the matter is that the storage size of a game being too large can harm accessibility. Genshin for PC and console currently takes somewhere around 30 GB of storage, while the mobile version takes somewhere around 10. Getting more storage for a PC or console is not terribly hard or expensive, but it still is a potential barrier of entry. The problem more so exists for mobile players, since upgrading phone storage is usually not very simple. Sure, miHoYo could choose to make different decisions regarding the PC and console builds versus the mobile builds, but I find it hard to believe that they would do anything to alienate the mobile audience when a large amount of the game's profits come from mobile spenders. If a new area is added to Genshin, the expectation is that it will get continued support for the foreseeable future. I think one of the biggest complaints about Dragonspine is that once you finish the main content there isn't much more to do and therefore not much reason to return. There's always been a couple of commissions you might get occasionally, one resource you might want to farm for weapons, and an artifact domain, but not much else. 3 updates after Dragonspine's release, they added the cryohypostasis though, showing that they do want existing areas to stay relevant. Making the Archipelago a permanent addition means that players will want more down the line, when chances are that they don't have any plans for it in the near future. Making the Archipelago temporary gives miHoYo the freedom to not have to think about it anymore after its initial release. This last point is probably more of a stretch compared to the other ones, but I still think it's a point of discussion worth bringing up. From watching the behind the scenes video for Dragonspine, it seems very clear to me that one thing miHoYo heavily values is area diversity. When you compare Dragonspine to Mondstadt and Liyue, there are very obvious differences like the snowy weather and the sheer cold mechanic, but there are also more subtle changes like the desaturated lighting. All of these things work together to create a completely different atmosphere from what the other areas in the game provide. So even though Sejnaya is also going to be a snowy land, I expect it to be completely different from how Dragonspine currently feels. What I'm trying to get at is, maybe the Archipelago isn't unique enough to be deserving of a permanent spot in the game. Liyue has islands of its own, and Inazuma is supposed to be a region made of islands, so it seems possible. So if you happen to not find these points very convincing, that's totally fair. The point of this video is not to defend miHoYo, but rather to bring to light how, like with many things, the answer is not as simple as you might initially think. This is just showing another perspective so that you can make an informed opinion. One suggestion I saw, which I felt could be plausible, is that when the game gets even bigger with more and more places to go, there could be a rotation of active areas to keep the game fresh with content while also not becoming too large in terms of storage. But of course, a change as drastic as that would inevitably come with its own slew of unique problems, so I'll just leave it at that. Well, that's about everything I wanted to say in this video. As always, thank you for watching.